Well, I guess I should go ahead and finally tell my story. It's not very K-like, to be honest. It's not in the woods. I was no funds at the time. There are no skinwalkers, goatmen, fleshgates involved, as far as I know anyways. But I feel compelled to finally getting around to writing it out. Just for the record, and maybe so you guys can get some spoops out of it. Back when I was 17, I lived just outside of Washington, D.C. I enjoyed it well enough for the most part. D.C. is no funds, and has a massive homeless problem, but is not a complete shithole. I was a complete autist in school, with depression and shit, and I got kicked out of my nice Catholic prep school due to shit grades. Instead of sending me to public school over in VA where I lived, my parents decided to send me to a non-traditional school in the city. In addition to school, I had a job in a shitty movie theater in Rockville, which is just outside DC, to the northwest. Now I was 17 at the time, but had no driver's license. When I was able to get my learner's permit at 15, I procrastinated due to not wanting to go to the DMV for a whole year. When I finally did get my permit, I did my hours and driving course and such, but I fell into the same trap of not wanting to go to the DMV, so I did not get my license until I was almost 18. So because of this, and because my parents rightfully did not want to drive me into DC every day during rush hour, only to then have to go back into Virginia to get to work, I took the metro to school and work every day. If there are any Washingtonians here, then you might understand my route. I started out on the Virginia side of the Potomac River to the east of the city, at Virginia Square/GMU station, which is on the Orange Line. For the purposes of this story, the Orange Line starts in Virginia and ends just outside of DC, to the northeast, and the Red Line starts out northwest, where my job was, and then went down into the center of DC, and up to the northeast again. My school was about a block away from the Easton Market metro station on the Orange Line, about 3/4 of a mile southeast from the Capitol, along Pennsylvania Avenue. My job was a little ways away from the Rockville metro station. When my shift ended at around 11:15, I had to book it over to the metro most days. Stations close at 12 Sunday to Thursday, and take the Red Line down to the metro center, which as the name suggests is in central DC. Switch to the Orange Line, then take the Orange Line to East Falls Church in Virginia, from which I would take a bus or get a cab home. I'll put it all in a map I'll make and post along with this. Sorry a whole post of this is just setup. The setup is important. So now that all of that is established, I can start getting into the story. For a couple months, everything was completely unremarkable. I had ridden the metro on and off for most of my life, but never this extensively, so I was fine with the whole experience. The only part that ever felt weird to me was coming home at night. During the weekends, even at like 1 a.m., people were on the metro, but during the week, when I came home from work, it was very common for me to be the only person on the train, and sometimes even the only person in an entire station, though I wasn't really spooked by it, at least for a while. I always sat up front in the train, like the very front. I liked looking out of the front of the train and watching the tracks go by. I had loved doing this as a kid, and I still did because I was still a child, even at 17. One night, I was riding the Red Line back from Rockville to Metro Center. I was the only person in the car, probably in the train. I caught the last train before the system closed. I was looking out the front of the train like usual, when I saw something weird. It looked like a wet branch, like birch or something. It was thin, almost spindly. It was pressed up against the wall when I first saw it, as the train's headlights started to hit it. I thought it must have been a length of wire or pipe, but then it moved. It was really quick, not even like twitchy quick. It just suddenly moved out of the edge of the headlights of the train, and I could not see it anymore. I wrote it off in my head as being overworked, as cliche as that is. After all, tending to a popcorn machine on a pretty empty movie theater is hard work. I pretty much forgot about the incident over the course of the week, due to school and such occupying my mind. And then about a week later, I saw it again, in about the same place on the line. This time, it was on the opposite end of the tunnel. and I got to see a little bit more of the thing before it moved away. It was connected to something bigger, like a leg connected to a body, which is what I immediately conjured up in my mind. As the train's headlights shone on it, it moved away with the same agility. But this time, about 10 seconds later, I saw it again, and it did the same thing. And then a few days later, it happened again. This time, all I saw was what looked like a foot, before whatever it was scampered off into the darkness. At this point, I was freaking the fuck out. I felt that terrible, deep-seated desire to know more start to grow. I started to be vigilant for the weird leg any time I was on my way home from work. I would see it more and more often over time. Sometimes I would see a little more than the leg. Sometimes I would even see 2 of the legs, but it would always scamper into the darkness as soon as the light from the train hit it. Sometimes I would see it a few times during one ride, sometimes not. I started trying to record whatever it was. I would take a notepad with me and record between which stops I would see it, how much of it I saw, and if I saw it repeatedly. At one point, it occurred to me to ask the train operator if he saw anything. So one night, after I got off at East Falls Church, I quickly asked the operator up front if he ever saw anything weird when he drove the trains at night. I tried not to be a spurg about it, but he seemed on edge when I asked him, even though he replied with a simple nah. Things continued like this for a while, and seeing the thing almost became part of my routine of getting home. I was not scared of it anymore. Not really, since I was in a fast-moving metal missile, and the thing never seemed to be hostile or anything. Things just continued to go about the same path, until one night, shit got fucking real. I was riding on the train, and I was waiting for the leg to show up, but it didn't. I had seen it every day for the past 2 weeks, but there was nothing tonight. I was thinking to myself something along the lines of being sad that the 2-week streak was coming to a close when I saw them. 2 glints in the darkness. My eyes at this point had gotten so used to spotting things in the darkness, due to months of spotting this thing, in addition to years of playing Twitch shooters, so I saw them there, and I knew they were not normal. But I still tried to rationalize it, even after months of spotting a leg in the metro tunnels. But then they blinked. It was unmistakable that it was a blink that had occurred. I jumped so hard I nearly pulled a muscle in my leg. I could tell that those eyes that I saw were entirely black and beady, like the eyes of a rat. Suddenly, my fear for the thing in the dark was renewed. I was on edge for the rest of the ride to Metro Center. Though I still felt safe inside the train, I was realizing the gravity of the situation. There was something in the dark of the tunnels of the metro, and it had taken enough of an interest in me to show up almost daily. That thought followed me to Metro Center. Ironically, I felt safer in the station than I did on the train, due to the simple fact I had never seen anything weird in the stations. I got to Metro Center, got off the train, and waited for my next train. It was then that I started hearing it. A soft pitter-patter, not unlike that of a rodent scurrying across the floor. I became on edge again. The noise started getting louder, and I started to shit myself more. At the point where it started actually sounding like human footsteps, I said fuck it to myself, and turned around towards the tunnel where my train had come from. I shouldn't have. It was there. Not just a leg or eyes. The thing in its entirety. And it was not in the tunnel anymore. It was on the platform with me. That thing is something I will never forget. It was like a person, but warped to the point where almost all traces of humanity were gone. It was thin, horribly thin, emaciated. I could see how its pallid, grey flesh wrapped around its bones, not even covering the holes in some of its leg and arm bones. It was hunched over, not on all fours, but hunched over like an elderly person, with its legs crumpled down, and its arms held in front of its chest, like how a prairie dog holds its arms when it stands up. Its head was completely hairless, and was hung down so I could not make out its face. I opened my mouth to scream, but I just whimpered like a baby. I should not have done that. I think I provoked it. It started to move towards me, with a horrible gait. It stayed in its hunched over position, low to the ground, but its legs extended out, and it took long strides forward, like crouch walking. Its legs wobbled and twitched with each step towards me. It was obvious this thing was not used to walking like this, that it was better suited to crawling along the walls. As it came closer, I started to smell it. It had that pungent, rancid odor of trash in the city. My eyes started to water as it got closer. Speaking of which, it was closing the gap fast. When I first turned around, there must have been about 150 feet between us, but within 5 or 6 steps, it was only about half that distance away. My stupid brain finally kicked in and put me into survival mode, and I fucking booked it across the platform. My stupid idea was to try and outrun it to the end of the platform, then jump across the tracks to the other platform, and keep running out towards the surface. My plan got about a quarter of the way done when I realized it was not going to work, because that's when the thing stretched out. I looked over my shoulder and shit myself again. The thing was now standing on its legs, and it had its arms out. I don't know how I only managed to see as much as I did in the tunnel, but what I saw in there was not accurately representing the whole thing. It must have been 15 feet tall at least. Its torso was thinner than its femur. Its arms came down to its shins as it let them drag along, and then there was its face. Its face looked like that of a starving man, with sallow skin tightly wrapping its cheekbones like a corset. Its eye sockets were far too big for its beady little eyes, with the top of the socket jutting out a good 2 inches beyond where the eye ended, and the mouth was a gaping hole, with no jaw to be seen. The thing had reached its full height, and I had just made my peace with death, when some beautiful motherfucker honked the horn on his train that was coming in downstairs, to signify that no one else could get on. I don't know why, but that horn caused the monstrosity in front of me to reel backwards, and let out the most horrible sound I've ever heard, before going down on all fours and scuttling back into the tunnel. I took a cab home that night, and then pretty much every night for the rest of the year. I have not gone on the metro there since. I've moved further into Virginia, so I have not been around Washington, but even if I was back there, I would not take the metro again, even if it meant losing $1 million or whatever. I did some more research. Apparently, there are some urban myths of something in the tunnels down there. I also found out about a series of abandoned tunnels, just under DuPont Circle, the metro stop nearest to which I commonly saw the thing. That's pretty much it. Here's a map of where I saw the thing, with stations where I was near when I saw it, marked, and areas to avoid also marked. This one is about my native friend's grandpa. He told it to my friend, who told it to me. It's been a long time since he shared it with me, but I still think about it sometimes. It's not really spooky, just interesting. I'm sharing it with his permission. I'll call friend's dad Darwin. Darwin grows up in a fairly traditional Indian family, but one day, his dad disappears. No one ever discusses it. Mom will not talk about it. Shortly after that, Darwin and his brother are taken from their mom and put into a boarding school. It has an English-only policy, and it is cruelly enforced. They smack the shit out of you if they hear you using Indian words or phrases. Darwin barely knows any English. Needless to say, he gets corrected frequently. But Darwin is stubborn. He refuses to learn English. The beatings get worse, but he's too concerned about his brother to care about that. While Darwin is not much to look at, his little brother is a really cute kid. One old teacher is always pulling him aside late in the evening. His brother comes back from these encounters crying quietly. Won't talk about it or what happened. Darwin is scared for the first time. Then he has a dream. An old man appears to him in the dream. Darwin intuitively understands the old man to be an ancestor. He says to Darwin, "You have to run away. and join the white man's society, or you are doomed. Become a white man, but do not forget your heritage. Darwin changes overnight, starts learning English, picks it up quickly. When he knows enough to get by, he takes his brother and runs away. But Darwin doesn't know where to go. He's supposed to join white society, but does not know how. He and his brother end up wandering around hungry through the forest. Then the old man, from his dream, walks up to him. It's as if he appeared out of nowhere. He tells Darwin to go to a nearby farm and ask for work. Darwin is shocked at seeing the old man in the flesh, but he does as he is told. Finds the farm, asks for a job. The farmer hires him. No pay, just room and board. The old farmer had sons once, but they all died. Eventually, he grows fond of the two young Indian boys, 14 and 11 at the time. Raises them as his own. When Darwin turns 17, America enters World War II. The Haudenosaunee actually made a specific agreement with the United States never to fight in their wars. This was pre-Revolutionary War. But Darwin signed up anyway. This is our homeland. We've got to protect it. Plus, he can further join American life, like the old man told him to. During the war, the old man shows up periodically, warning him of danger. His platoon thinks he's a fucking psychic. Darwin laughs, thinking he basically confirmed the spooky Indian stereotype. Comes out of the war, not just unscathed, but a war hero to boot. The same cannot be said of many of his friends. Darwin lost most of them. He vows never to fight in another war again. But then there's Kay. Darwin meets her when he visits the res for the first time since he was a kid. The two fall in love. Kay gets pregnant. Darwin needs a job. He winds up working for the military again, in various capacities. Kay, by the way, is kind of a big deal back home. People say she's going to become an important elder. She seems to understand that an ancestor is watching over Darwin. She can seemingly see the old man, even when Darwin can't. She says the ancestor needed Darwin to learn about white people, because his son is going to work to build bridges between Indians and white people. This shocks Darwin. Their baby has not even been born yet. Sure enough, it's a boy, my friend. Darwin raises him to speak his own Indian language, teaches him Indian customs, but also explains everything he knows about how white people think. Tells him his life is going to be hard, that he will always feel torn and without a home. Tells him his suffering is exactly what will allow him to build bridges, and that he needs to play a small part in helping bringing about reconciliations between people. That child's name? Albert Einstein. That's pretty much it. My friend's grandpa died not too long ago. He was a healthy, strong old man. But he told everyone that the ancestor showed up in a dream. It had been a long time since he had appeared. All he said to Darwin was, "It's time to go. Your job is done." 3 days later, my friend's grandpa died in his sleep. Really shitty Greentext incoming. The summer after senior year is filled with many happy memories that many of us will never forget. This is not one of those memories. Be me, 18, living in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. Senior year is about to get out, and it's been warm lately. Let's fucking rage, mate. Plan huge senior skip day party up by a lake a town over. There are actually 2 lakes near the next town. One is lower than the other, and the higher one is warmer and used to fill the second one during the summer. We decided the best bet for the party would be at the higher lake, because less cops, more forest to run and hide in, and more privacy for our heathen ways. Fast forward a couple of days to the party. A metric fuck ton of people are headed up to swim and party with us. Probably more like 20, but we filled 2 Suburban and 1 pickup. Driving up, everyone is cramped and excited, singing along to songs and drinking. Pretty fun time. The road we were on was pretty windy, with a steep hill going up on one side, and a smaller, downward sloping hill leading down to the lake on the other. We pull off to the shoulder, and a small army of hormones unloads into the water. Water is warm, girls are pretty enough, and the drinks are flowing. We don't even hear the men come upon us. Suddenly, a girl, let's call her Brittany, starts screaming and pointing at him. We all look and kind of freak out because he has a gun in the crook of his arm. He laughs and introduces himself as Wayne. Drunken friend Nick offers him a beer, and me and a couple others start talking a bit with him. Eventually the issue of the gun comes up, and Wayne explains that he is hunting something in the woods. I remember this specifically because he was pretty vague about what he was after, and I was thinking, we're going to relive Deliverance tonight, and I'm just praying I'm not going to be Bobby and have to squeal like a pig. Of course, drunk-ass Nick tells him our plans for the night, camping, partying, etc. Wayne gets a little quiet, and says that tonight might not be the best night for that. Ignore that shit, I'm a drunk teen. Eventually, Wayne fucks off to go hunt Sasquatch or whatever. Side note about Wayne, last summer, he was actually killed out by that lake. There was an article in the papers about him being some kind of master tracker and living out in those woods for long periods of time. I don't think his death had anything to do with the later events of the story, but the general consensus around the town at the time of his death was that the news story was bullshit. Anyways, a girl, Shannon, decided that her and her boyfriend would go set up the camp. I guess that's what the kids are calling it these days. They take the pickup up the mountain more to the site and proceed to touch genitals. Couple hours later, we say fuck swimming and all pile back into the cars. Because the spare seats on the pickup left, some people have to pile in the back of the Suburbans. Something seemed a little off at the time, but we chalked it up to the booze. We keep driving up the road, counting the mile markers as we went up. The road to the site was a shitty gravel road off the main road, past mile marker 20. We head up the road a ways and have to stop because a tree is across the path. Not that large of a tree, so we all pile out and get it off to the side. We all climb back into the cars, and once again, something seems off. Did we forget someone? Asked Nick. We concluded that we had the 18 people that we needed, but something still felt odd. Eventually, we make it up to the site. Obviously, this wasn't an actual campsite, and I have no idea how my friends found it, but apparently, they had gone to the spot a few times before, and never had any problems with the law. It was about 7 miles down the gravel road, deep into the forest of evergreens. It was surrounded on all sides by thick walls of trees. It was a pretty good-sized spot, but more importantly, it was secluded, which was exactly what we needed for the night. There was a large fire pit in the middle, but the stones around it had apparently been scattered around the clearing. The pickup is parked there, but no people are outside, and the camp is like 10% set up. We decide to fuck with Shannon and her boyfriend Kyle, but when we came up on the truck, we saw them fully clothed, just kind of sitting in the back. Nick bangs his hand on the window, and I swear, they about jumped out of their skins. They realize who it is and come out, a little shaken but laughing. We asked what had them so rattled, and they explain that they started setting up camp about an hour ago. We know what they did for the first hour or two, when they stopped to have a smoke break. They said they had been by the fire pit when a really gross smell started to come from the woods. They had gone to the edge of the clearing when they heard low voices babbling off in the woods. They noped the fuck out and locked themselves in the truck. Immediately we were blamed for fucking with them, until I pointed out that about an hour ago, we were all trying to move a tree that they left for us in the middle of the road. All around confusion when they said there had been no tree on the way up, but whatever. Oregon has a lot of trees, and they fall over sometimes, because trees are stupid like that. These two were probably just paranoid from the weed. We finish setting up the camp as the sun begins to set, and begin the preparations for the night. We make some food, but with 20 people, it goes pretty quickly. We continue drinking, smoking, and having a good time, as the sun got lower and disappeared. It was about 10:30, when one of the girls comes running out of the woods, screaming bloody murder. Everyone stops what they're doing and listens to her sob about a person out in the woods. She said his back was to her, and he was just kind of looking at the ground. When she called out to it, it raised its head and started twitching. This was when she realized it was not one of us, and got the hell out of there. Most of the guys there were drunk and immediately angry at this guy in the woods. We decided it must be Wayne fucking with us, so we got an elite squad of drunken high schoolers armed with varying sizes of branches and went out towards where she saw it. We split up briefly in the woods, which was a very eerie feeling, and after about 15 minutes, we decided that we had scared Wayne off. We were regrouping back at the camp when the smell started again. The only thing I can describe it as is the smell of burnt hair, plus the metallic smell of having a bloody nose, only 10 times worse. One or two of the drunker people actually vomited. One of the guys, Sam, decides he's had enough and wants to go back. After some debate, we decided that he was probably sober enough to drive, and that we would let him take a full pickup load back to his house. The girl from the woods, her boyfriend, Sam, and a second girl leave in the truck. The smell had died down quite a bit. Don't want to be labeled a pussy. We continue drinking and having fun, ignoring the feeling of something being off. Eventually I have to pee, so my friends, Fletcher and Heston, referred to as Skeeter by our friends, walk down the gravel road a few 100 feet to drain the main vein. As we're peeing, we notice someone in the middle of the road, a little ways down. I'm a little uneasy, but Skeeter is a big dude. Went on to play college football as a linebacker, so I figure we're going to be okay. We walk up on the person, who has their back to us once again. I recognize that sweatshirt. Sam is standing in the middle of the road, in the dark, looking at the ground. Once again, something seems off, but I can't quite place it, so we start to call out to him. No response. Start walking towards him, and his head lifts up, and we can see him twitching. I finally realize what was so off. The woods around us are dead silent, and have been for some time. I stop my two friends and whisper this to them. Skeeter does not think it's a big deal, but Fletcher is an avid hunter, and agrees that something is not right. We look back at Sam, and he is about half as far away as he was before, back still turned and twitching, looking like he was doubled over, silently laughing. That did it for Skeeter, and we all sprint back to the campground. The rest of the group is looking at us weirdly, because all of us, even the giant-ass Skeeter, are pale as a sheet, stammering about how we need to leave. There is a large argument about how none of us can drive, because we're all too drunk, and that if we're trying to mess with them, it's not very funny. The smell comes back, worse this time, and I actually vomit, mostly beer. Branches begin to snap around the outskirts of the camp. We can only hear this because the forest has not hit on mute yet. Fletcher, the hunter, looks like he is about to shit himself, as he points out that a four-legged animal would not make sounds like that when walking, only a bipedal one. That's when we hear it. A low, guttural voice comes out of the woods. Give me a fucking beer. Would have been comical if I wasn't already shitting myself and the voice had been normal. It sounded like a dog, mixed with a woman screaming, with irregular phrases and volume adjustments. Help me, fuckers. That was horrible, but okay. Mass fucking panic. People running to cars. Managed to get one of the subs filled and send it off with a designated drunk driver, my friend Nick. We fill the other Suburban, and I am left outside to put out the fire. Well drunken on. 18 years ain't a bad run. Dead fucking sprint to throw the water bucket over the fire. Usain bolted back to the car. Probably could have gotten a full ride if someone timed me. Dive over the 2 full rows of seats and take my spot in the very back. We make it back to the main road and are about halfway back to town when we see the other Suburban in a ditch with everyone around it. Drunk ass Nick crashed. Nick will not really meet eyes with anyone and is muttering under his breath. I get closer to him and realize he's reciting the Hail Mary under his breath. He won't acknowledge me, and looks pale as a sheet. The smell is back. We are trying to figure out what to do when the whole road is lit up like day. One of those huge, lifted trucks with about 1,000,000 lights pulls up to us. It stops and shines the lights on us for what seems like an hour, probably more like a minute though. The lights cut off and Wayne hops out, his gun in hand. Pretty uneventful from here. Crams the people from First Suburban into his pickup. Asks each one of us for our names before he lets anyone get back into any car. Drops us all out at our friend's house and leaves. Nick gets a fat ticket and a suspended license for DUI and leaving the scene of the accident, but his mom's Suburban seems okay. He took his own life about 3 months later. He had been complaining about lack of sleep, and I think the whole experience really fucked with him. Skeeter and I ran into Wayne again, later that summer at the lake. We saw his truck at a popular swimming hole, and went to ask a few questions. He seemed pretty honest about most things, until I asked him about why he had been so intent on asking us all of our names the night that he picked us up, because we assumed he was planning on reporting us to the Rangers or something, but we never heard anything about it, besides Nick. I'll never forget his answer. When I pulled up to you guys, I counted 17 people, but when I asked for your names, I only got 16. One of your little friends walked back into the woods when I had my lights on him. Of course, it sounded like bullshit to me, until I began to think of the events that night. Starting with the swimming hole, there had been something off about the trip that I had not realized until we had gotten into the cars. There had always been an extra person with us. I think they slipped in during the swimming, and slipped out when we were moving the tree. It came back in when we sent out our little hunting party, and must have slipped back out when we were all drinking, only to come back into the group when we were all shitting ourselves, trying to get out of there. That's why I had to sit in the back, because we had an extra person that put us over the seat limit. I don't think it was ever in my car though. I think my friend Nick noticed it in his car, and that's what made him crash. That's what made him cry and pray that night, and I guarantee that's what made him take his own life. So first, let me describe how I've spent the last 3 summers. Live in Ohio. Be a camp counselor at Inner Woods Camp in Hocking Hills region of southern Ohio. Clear Creek Valley is one of the most biodiverse areas in the entire world. Not kidding, more than some rainforests. Nearest civilization is town of Rockbridge, tiny, many miles away. Everyone lives in cabins with no air conditioning, power, or lights. I'm assigned to the older boys because I'm better with the bushcraft. Teach them batoning, fire building, debris huts, edible plants, the works. One night every week, we camp out, use the skills, and sleep under the stars. Every week, each cabin has to do a camp improvement project, chores. Little kids pull weeds on what few, unpaved, barely maintained paths we have. Big kids, 14 to 17, use saws, rakes, and shovels to clear out near campsites or refurbish old ones. There's always been a rivalry between the older boys and girls, especially among the counselors. That's the camp. It's a nice place. I'm there for 6 weeks every summer, but the kids only stay for 1-week sessions. After 3 years of romping through the forest there, I know the place like the back of my hand. There's still some places I have not been, but they are few and far between. As a side note, every counselor has a camp name, so campers cannot find us on Facebook and stuff. I'm Hawkeye. My friends in the story are Turkey, certified EMT and co-counselor. Magenta, old friend / engineering student. Khaleesi, business student. Magenta and Khaleesi are counselors for the older girls. Turkey and I are counselors for the older boys. Be last week of camp. Everyone happy to be going home. What camp improvement projects don't get done have to be done by counselors after camp is done, but before they can leave. Fuck that. Turkey, Magenta, Khaleesi and I all agree to have our kids do all of the hard chores so we don't have to do them alone. We clean up a campsite on the side of a hill called Black Feather. The girls clean up a site called Human Nature. They're bragging because it has not been used in around 20 years. Camp is 90+ years old, and we will finally get it up and going again. I'm a bit jealous because I've never been to that site. The only clue as to where it is a dotted line on a 30-year-old hand-drawn map indicating a shitty trail. Magenta says she knows where it is. I think she's bluffing, but she's a smart girl. I figure if anyone could find it, it would be her. Next day, head to Black Feather, find box tortoise, and explain tortoise versus turtle. A tree has fallen right in the campsite. Go gadget saw. 15 teenage boys attack the fallen tree, 1 foot diameter, with hacksaws. That bitch didn't know what hit it. Show them how to split wood. Black Feather will have firewood for many years. Return to camp. Now it's time to select overnight spots. Magenta has a smug grin on her face, looks me in the eye, and says, "We're going to human nature. What do you think about that?" "Never been there. Where is it?" "It's in the valley, a new part of the forest. We found where the firing was, but all the rocks were strewn about." "That's weird." "Nah." Walks away. Turkey comes up to me and says he let a younger cabin take Black Feather, as it's not too far of a hike for them. "Where are we staying then?" "Tatanka." I was very excited, because there is a very cool clearing right by Tatanka. Perfect for astronomy. It's right on top of a hill, so it's a tough hike, but that makes the food taste so much better. Next day, overnight day, 15 boys plus 2 counselors. We made hamburgers on a grate that we carried up. 7 pounds of meat to divide. We ate like kings. Campfire jacks for dessert. Basically tinfoil wrapped tortilla with chocolate and marshmallow inside. Uh-oh. Person who packed the food gave us no tortillas. I'm fine with going without, but some of the guys were looking forward to them. "Don't worry guys, I'll just pop over to another campsite and see if they have any extras." Quietly to Turkey. "Where are the other campsites? I've heard the girls from downhill all evening, but I don't know where they are." "I don't know, man. His first year of counseling. But Magenta said human nature was in the valley. Did you see that raggedy-ass trail leading downhill when we were headed up? Like 20 meters past the last cabin?" "I did see it, but it did not look like it had been used recently." "You sure that's right?" "Yeah, man, that's where the trail is on the map." It is around the right area, but the map even has written on it, "Not to scale. Some sites may be overgrown." "Alright, man, that's about right." I go down towards the trail. 9:30 p.m., so it's dark. I've got a whistle, my Mora companion. Blade bathed in white ash, so it works on demons, and headlamp. Get to trailhead. It's a bit dark, but not so much that it is oppressive. I head into the trail. About 5 meters in, it suddenly turns from undergrowth to grass underfoot. This is odd. All the undergrowth is getting thinner too, but the path is still very defined for something 20 years old. Suddenly no undergrowth, just trees. Eerie, almost brightness. Don't even need my headlamp. It's a new moon, so this is fucking weird. The section of the forest I'm in looks very new. Thin trees, low ground cover, no bushes or mid-level plants. The feeling I get in it though, it feels old, like walking inside a tomb old. I keep walking, more to distract myself from how weird this section of the forest is. I realize that I don't hear the girls anymore. They're normally very loud, being teenage girls. I stop. Everything in the world stops around me. Not even insects are chirping. I see fog slowly filling into the valley. It's now bright in there, despite being a new moon. This place is not good. I am actually getting goosebumps describing it. A stream runs down the center of the valley. Shallow, but still a stream. I don't know why, because every fiber of my being said otherwise, but I continued on the path, crossing the stream. Once I crossed, a wave of the most powerful feeling hit me. One I can't even articulate to people. The best way I can describe it is like feeling with every ounce of your body that something is the most despicable evil that has ever existed. This place was bigger than me, bigger than the forest. I should not be there. I was more scared than anything, since there was nothing to fight. I ran, further down the path. I don't know why the fuck I did it. Every step carried me further into it, but I could not stop. It felt like I had run at least a mile or two, but it was probably no more than a few hundred meters. I am not afraid of admitting that I was almost in tears at this point. It's so much easier when there's something to focus your fear on, but when there's nothing, it just takes over. Suddenly, off the side of increasingly dispersing path, glow of a campfire, sound of girls talking in low voices, stumble towards the campsite. Magenta's voice, much shakier than normal. Hello? Who's there? I try to be as calm as possible to avoid spooking the campers, although I realize they are already unsettled as it is. Hey Magenta, it's Hawkeye. I'm coming out of the bush. Oh, good. What do you need? I'd totally forgotten what I was there for. Just popping by. Cool, she says, then gestures me to come over to her, away from the campers. Hawkeye, what the fuck are you doing? Was that you? Where did you come from? Why are you here? I was getting some... Wait, was what me? What do you mean, where did I come from? You took that path, right? She looked me in the eyes, and for a second, I see the same look that must have been on my face minutes earlier, when I realized what I was feeling. She shook her head just slightly, and I could feel the color drain from my face. This was a bad idea, Hawkeye. What are you gonna do? She told me how it felt much safer at the campsite with the fire going. She certainly was not going to lead them out through the forest in the dark. Khaleesi was also new and did not know how to get anywhere, so it was up to Magenta. She said she'd stay up all night and tend the fire, keep the flames hot and large. I looked her in the eyes and asked her if she'd be okay. She said yes, but did not sound convinced. I remembered why I was there and grabbed some extra tortillas, because damn it, I'm not going home empty-handed. Magenta shows me the path that they took, old but completely different from my ingress route. I make it back on the other path. I feel it as I leave the campsite, but it fades as I walk away. Make it to a big, well-maintained path. Holy crap, this is the same one the other path led out on. Walk back towards camp. Pass where it should have been. What? It's not there. It's like the path closed up. Some of the thickest forest I've ever encountered where that damn path should have been. I know that's where it was because there was a large boulder opposite of it. Anyways, make it back to Tatanka where the boys have been waiting for me. Turkey yells to me as I walk up. Hey, Hawkeye, where have you been? Did you walk all the way back to the kitchen? I realize it's like an hour and a half later. Yeah, the girls didn't have any. Come up. Let the older boys take over teaching the younger ones how to make campfire jacks. Pull Turkey aside. The girls had tortillas. What? Don't ever go to human nature. There's something else in that forest. What do you mean? I have him look me in the eye. He sees that I'm not joking. Turkey, it is not a good area of forest. Never go there. Okay, man, I won't. We go to bed, but I can't sleep in my hammock. I kept having dreams about the forest. The next day, wake up. Have campers rekindle fire, since it burned down. Clean up site. Pack. Head back to camp. Get equipment. Put it away. Send campers with Turkey to get showers and stuff. Magenta pulls me aside, outside the dining hall, but away from the campers. She has bags under her eyes, obviously from lack of sleep. Hawkeye, did you sleep last night? Not well. I kept having dreams. About the forest? Yeah. Hawkeye, if I tell you something, do you promise you'll believe me? You felt it. You know what it was like. Sure, Magenta. Go ahead. Every girl I ever talked in their sleep last night, or woke up crying at some point in the night. We didn't eat breakfast. We just got out of there. Every girl? Every damn girl, I swear to you, I heard them. I did not sleep a second. I was tending the fire. I don't know what would have happened if it would have gone out. Okay, Magenta, it's okay. I believe you. That's about it. Go home 4 days later. I don't know what the hell it was, but that's it. Sorry for the long post time. I'll compile it into one big image and post it next time. Oh, on the master map, which is a hand-painted, contour lines and everything, map on a wooden board, which all the other maps are based upon, there is a red smudge between the path to human nature and the last cabin, right where my path would be. I shit you not. I think someone had a double meaning when they named the campsite Human Nature. Whenever I think of human nature as a concept, I think of conflict, war, hatred, and violence. The first person to find a campsite gets to name it, but nobody I've asked knows who founded human nature. It's just always been there. I'll never go back. Camp is a wonderful place that has a special meaning to me, but human nature is something else entirely. I want to tell you a story, X. It's the story of a man. You see, my great-grandma was a real nice old lady. She had a nice little old lady house. We used to go up there a lot before she passed away several years ago, and my grandparents tore it down to build a new house for themselves on top. One thing I remembered was her attic. Boy, was it fucking scary. It was dark. Only one light bulb would work, and you had to be real careful, because there was a lot of exposed insulation. So if you stepped off the boards to get around, you'd probably fall straight through the ceiling into the room below. But it wasn't so much the atmosphere of the attic. The fact that it was dark, dusty, and smelt a little weird. It was the story my uncle and dad used to tell me about the attic, and now I'm going to tell you. A very long time ago, when my grandpa was just a little boy, they moved into the house. It was nice. 2 bedrooms, a nice bathroom, dining room, kitchen. My great-grandparents made a very decent living. My great-grandfather owned a very successful body shop. My great-grandmother sold Avon. One day, my grandpa was playing in the living room when there was a knock at the door. He answered, and there stood a man. He was wearing a nice suit, holding a nice hat against his chest, with a polite smile on his face. "Hey there, Junior," he said. "Is your father home?" My great-grandfather approached the door, suspicious. "If you're selling anything, I'm not interested, thanks," he said, before trying to close the door. But no, this stranger interrupted with a start. No, sir. I promise I'm no salesman. I'd just like to talk, if you would not mind." "About what?" my grandfather asked. "I was wondering if I could take a look in your attic. You see, I used to live here and it would really bring back some memories." The man was nervous, but my great-grandfather was not about to fall for any con man. "Sorry, sir, my wife's about to finish dinner. Not interested." So he shut the door and ushered my young grandfather away. A day passed, and it was another hot summer day. My great-grandmother was fixing my grandpa lunch when she heard a knock. "Wallace, could you get the door?" she called to great-grandpa, who sighed and obeyed his wife. It was the man again. "Now see here, mister, I already told you, I don't want some stranger in my house. You leave me and my family alone before you upset my son and wife. And if you upset my son and wife, I think there's going to be some trouble." "Please, sir," the man pleaded, wringing his hands. "It'll only take a moment. I absolutely must get up there, if even for 10 minutes. This time, my grandfather did not even give him the liberty of a goodbye, only a slammed door. A few days passed, peaceful playing, working. The life of your average Canadian, upper-middle-class family took place as usual. My great-grandfather, great-grandmother, and grandfather sat eating dinner one evening. I like to imagine they were having my grandma's, this is what I called her, roasted chicken and potatoes, so delicious. But I digress. Again, a knock at the door. It sounded important. I swear, if it's that son of a bitch asking to get in our attic again, I'll be tuning his clock. What good? My great-grandpa muttered, getting up. "Wallace, please. Nothing in front of little Jim." My great-grandmother cried. It was the man again. He was not, however, alone. He was with another man who looked similar. "Now, sir, before you chase us away, please understand we're brothers, and we absolutely must speak with you," he said, before my great-grandfather could curse him out, up and down. "Well, spit it out then, man. Now you've gone and interrupted my supper after a long day's work, and this had better be good," my grandfather threatened. "Tell me, sir, have you ever heard strange noises in your house? Scratching, shuffling, maybe even light moaning from your attic?" the new man asked calmly. My grandfather turned stone cold. His son, my grandpa, had often whined of scratching and other sounds, to which both his parents attributed to maybe mice. "Maybe we have. Maybe we haven't. Why do you ask?" he answered coolly, crossing his arms. The men at the door exchanged worried glances. "If only you'd let us come up to your attic. You could come if you like, but it would be better if you told your son to go to his room, your wife to the kitchen, and for us men to go upstairs. So my great-grandfather told my grandpa to go play, asked his wife to clear the table, and led the men up into the dank attic. They used it for only storage. There was no real reasons to come up here ever. The two men looked around. They knocked on the wood of the walls in the attic in various different spots. Knock knock, hollow. Knock knock, hollow. Knock knock, not hollow. My grandfather froze as they nodded at one another before turning to my great-grandfather. Now sir, please believe us when we say we'll pay for any damages that need to be fixed, and that what we're about to do may be very shocking, maybe even frightening to you, so you may very well not want to see what's about to happen. My great-grandfather pondered right then and there about turning his heel and waiting downstairs, but no, he had to be the man and stay for his family's sake. Go ahead then, what's in there? He asked. He wished he hadn't. The two men pulled at the boards, peeling away the old wood fairly easily. My great-grandfather felt viscous bile build in his stomach and throat. The smell. Oh God, the smell. His body was frail and gnarled. His skin was a ghostly white. His bared teeth yellow as freshly boiled sweet corn. His eyes were open, glazed over and staring. The pupils were milky. He was blind. The white were barely that. Instead, they were bloodshot, to a point that was almost unbelievable. His fingernails resembled long, brown talons. Horror filled my great-grandfather as the two men bowed their heads. It's him, said one. The other only sighed and covered his nose with his sleeve. This thing, this remnant of a once living man, was dead, but freshly. That was when my great-grandfather had reached his boiling point. Now you had both better explain to me right now just what in God's name is going on here. Is this some sort of sick joke? I ought to blow the brains out of both of you where you stand, he bellowed. Sam, go get the blankets from the car. I'll explain. One man said as Sam nodded and left. Sir, please understand. We're no monsters, you see. This is our brother, he began fretfully, looking at the mangled creature in the wall. Your brother? You 6 sons of bitches locked up your own brother in this wall? My great-grandfather cried out, placing a hand on his queasy stomach. Never, sir, never, said the man. My father just passed. We never even knew this poor boy existed. Our whole, entire lives. My other brother and I. Now, it would seem our brother here was born with some sort of mental defect, something that my father and mother couldn't handle as parents. So they chose to do the unthinkable, rather than face the public with their shame, he explained, motioning for the shell of a man. Mind you, this story takes place in a time when something like a mental defect was seen as a terribly embarrassing thing. My great-grandfather held his head. He looked at the dead man in the attic, then back to the stranger. Get this thing out of my house. Send someone over to patch up your mess, and then never, ever come near my family again. You hear me? He ordered. You can rely on that, sir. We had not wanted to bother you in the first place, but we could not sleep at night, knowing some poor family was stuck with him, living up in your walls, you say. He probably was sucking moisture from the ceiling, and eating bugs and mold, I would think. It's amazing he could have survived. My grandfather solemnly said nothing. He only watched as Sam returned, and the two men bundled their strange, demented, and dead brother, leaving with a courteous thank you, followed by a repairman and a generous fruit basket a day later. When my grandmother asked what had happened, my grandfather could not bear telling her. Rats, he said. Just rats. Amazed that someone did not post it yet in countless K-note threads I've been in, coming from the very first K-note thread. Heading for inner woods with a bunch of mates somewhere in northern Europe. We decide to hike to this old abandoned Cold War era military facility. Reach the facility after 2 days of hiking. Shit is cash. We spend the day exploring and plinking birds with 22s. By nightfall, we set up a camp in one of the empty warehouses. We go outside, set up a campfire, and start making stew. All of a sudden, we hear the loudest and weirdest roar I've ever heard. We all shit ourselves, grab our rifles, and stare into the darkness. Something is moving about 100 meters out. We hear it rushing through the woods, into the facility area. We stand there, silent, listening. Then it stops, and suddenly, it is dead silent all around us. Just the stew, slowly boiling on the fire. We look at each other, and have a brief chat. We decide to carry on with making the stew. Next morning, we wake up and start packing. Everyone is making jokes about how we got so scared of some bear, etc. My buddy sees something lurking on top of the biggest facility building. We try to have a look at what it is, but it's too far away, some 200 meters maybe. It's just standing there, with two legs, probably staring at us. This thing is huge, maybe over 7 feet tall. I reach for binoculars to have a good look on who is trolling us with the ghillie suit. Just as I find the binos, my mate starts shouting. I look at the creature, or whatever it was, and it seems to be running via the facility wall like a lizard, very, very fast. By now it is clear, it's not a human, nor any animal I know of. It disappears behind one big bunker structure. We decide to nope the fuck out of there. We are scared shitless, even though it is day. As we are hiking back, we don't take any breaks before nightfall. As the sun sets down, we make a camp and start preparing supper. Everyone is a little tense, and we try to joke around. We decide to do guard duty during the night. My shift is 1 until 3. Birds are singing like crazy. They do that during the night here, and I managed to see a lone rabbit hopping around our campsite. I would have popped that fucker, but I wanted to let my buddies rest. Suddenly, the bird stops singing, and the rabbit stops, raises its head like it's listening to something. The rabbit nopes out of there very fast, like it's running for its life. I feel very uneasy, and flick on my flashlight and shine it towards the darkness. I'm hoping to see a glimpse of a fox, etc., that could have explained the strange behavior of the other animals, but the forest around us seems empty. Just as I'm putting the light out, I see something move behind the bushes, about 100 meters away. It was something big. I shine the light directly at the bushes, and try to get a look through my 10-22 scope. I managed to see something moving there, and I believe I saw a pair of yellowish eyes. Then it stands up. I don't know, to this day, what the fuck it was, but it was hairy looking, very dark, and had a face. The face of a lighter color, and there were 2 yellow eyes. The thing was around 7 feet tall, somewhat human-shaped. Although I did not get a very clear look with my shit-tier flashlight, I was 100% sure that that thing was not a human. So I started panicking, raised my gun, and lit that fucker up. I emptied the whole 25 RD Butler Creek mag in about 3 seconds. I didn't even aim. My buddies woke up and started shouting, and it was all chaos for about half a minute. I tried to tell them what happened as fast as I could. Having dropped my flashlight, I did not know if the creature had been hit or if it was there anymore. One of my buddies picked up the light and directed it at the direction I was pointing my gun at. And there it was. Just standing. Suddenly the thing just kind of falls down and starts slithering at us, making no noise at all. We start screaming, grab our packs and guns, and start noping out of there. We must have run like 10 kilometers straight before taking a break. All of us were shaking. We didn't share a word. We walked the rest of the way to the public campground in DEFCON 1, weapons ready and listening to every crack. I've never been as happy as I was when I saw some German tourists grilling sausages by their RV. They were all like, "What the fuck?" when we exited the woods, with guns in low ready stands. We said nothing, walked to our car, and drove away, breaking pretty much every speed limit on the way. We talked about the thing on the way home. None of us knew what it was, but everyone had seen it, and everyone was convinced that it was not a human, nor a normal animal of any sort. We decided to stay away from the woods for a while. Problem is that the wildlife around here is scared of people, even children, and there has not been one bear sighting in over 80 years. Last summer, we decided to be tough guys and find out what the hell that thing was. This time, we would go up with 3 ATVs in case we would have to bail out fast. We took 2 cameras, 3 308s, and 1 1276 with slugs. There were 4 of us, by the way. Load of survival gear, and one of my buddies managed to get a Gen 2 NV camera. We also had 7 pipe bombs, black powder in 2-inch iron tubing with caps at the end, plus visco fuse in case shit got out of hand. Yeah, it was kind of lame, fake operator tier shit, but we thought we'd get all famous and shit if we actually killed it or got footage of it. Anyways, we entered the woods with our gear and headed for the facility. Again, at the facility, everything looks normal and the birds are singing again. No sign of anything abnormal. We decide to map the surrounding area and look for anything suspicious. Nothing was found. We make camp at the very same warehouse as we did the last time. Night falls, and everything is still normal. We have guard shifts during the night, but nothing happens. Next day, we start exploring the woods area around the facility. We find a peculiar pile of dead trees. Looked like someone had hauled them there. We take a closer look. The trees are arranged in a fashion similar to a huge bird's nest. In the middle of the nest, there is one half-rotten moose carcass and a shitload of different animal bones. We start quietly noping back to our campsite. We park our ATVs next to the warehouse that we keep our camp on. We enter the camp warehouse and see our camping gear all torn up, the somewhat expensive cameras smashed against the floor, food taken, and sleeping bags torn to pieces. Fuck! We take everything we could in like a minute and start driving the hell out of Dodge. It's evening by the time we get back to the public campground. A police officer stops us by the gates and checks our gun permits. Then the officer proceeds by asking whether we wanted to volunteer for a search operation. Our ATVs will be much appreciated. Some hiker had apparently gone missing in the nearby forest, 20 kilometers from the facility site. We look at each other and shake our head. One of my buddies quickly says something about being late, and we drive out of there. The dude who went missing was never found. We decided that we would not go in a woodsing in that part of the country anymore.